Welcome to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed. Get ready to dive into the world of nonprofit leadership and sustainability, where the passion and unstoppable dedication of those making a real impact are celebrated. With your host, Jarrett Ransom, get ready to explore inspiring stories and game-changing strategies of nonprofit leaders from across the sector. In this season, we're focusing on critical management challenges that are key to the long-term success of nonprofit organizations. Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed is your go-to podcast for no-nonsense, in-depth conversations with the real-life superheroes of the nonprofit sector. Get ready to unleash your inner nerdiness and learn how to navigate and overcome the challenges that help build stronger, more sustainable organizations. Now, let's dive in and harness the collective power of our nonprofit networks to create lasting change.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed. I am honored to introduce you to today's guest, Heather Butler. Heather currently serves as the Director of Development and Communications at Ronald McDonald House Charities in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. She's a total rock star in the nonprofit space and honestly, a little bit of my hero. Now that might sound silly, but let me tell you why. Heather shows up as her authentic self even when she's nervous. She is truly committed to getting the job done with both heart and courage. And that kind of leadership is powerful and should not go unrecognized or unappreciated. So Heather, thank you again for saying yes and stepping into this conversation with me and for sharing your valuable time and insights with listeners. A big thank you to LaShonda Williams for making this connection. LaShonda knew exactly what she was doing because, as you're about to hear, Heather brings so much insight into the sector, her leadership style, and also how she supports and manages her team with intention. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to give a big shout out to our incredible season sponsors. Thank you to Bloomerang and Fundraising Academy at National University. Your support helps make these conversations possible, and I am truly grateful. All right, let's hear from Heather and how she is navigating leadership and sustainability in her current role. Well, hello, Heather. It is so nice to meet you. I want to give a shout out to our mutual connection, LaShonda, who is a previous guest on this podcast, and also someone I consider a dear friend, and I just absolutely love her. So anyone that comes through, a referral recommendation from LaShonda, I already feel like, holds so much value and weight to me. So welcome, and thank you for saying yes, Heather. Glad to have you here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate LaShonda recommending me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I am ready to dive in. And before we do, I would love for you to share just a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your organization, and where you're joining us from.
So my name is Heather Butler. I work with Ronald McDonald House Charities in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we are as far east as you can go, and we are a Canadian province. So our organization is the most recent, or the last house opened in Canada, and we have 15 suites here for families. So we're currently the smallest, but we're also in population wise the smallest province, so it works for us. And I've been with this organization since it opened back in August 2012.
Wow, that is fantastic. And I would love to share one of my best childhood memories is my mom having my brother and I every Christmas holiday baking something, cookies or some kind of baked good, and then we would deliver them to our local Ronald McDonald Charities house. And so when people ask me, how did you get into nonprofits? And I tell them, really, it has everything to do with my mom. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of time and we had a lot of heart. And Ronald McDonald Charities is one of those that when we get together now, we still think of like all of these amazing childhood memories. So I always think of the organization fondly because of my memory of this. So thanks for letting me share that. I'm sure there's so many others that have fond memories similar to that. But when we dive in, Heather, we talk or we think about leadership sustainability, and I've been so privileged and grateful to have these conversations with many leaders. I realize that they define these words maybe a little differently, right? So I'm really curious, what does leadership, what does sustainability look like today for you and your organization, in light of our current state of affairs?
I mean, I think there definitely can be a lot of definitions for leadership, and the way we actually define it and the way we live it varies for every fundraising professional and every organization. So for me, I think, leadership is a lot of rethinking things constantly, revisiting things and seeing how things are done. We have to pivot a lot in fundraising. So, when it comes to sustainability, I think, having the ability to adapt and change as things go on, whether it's, the current state of affairs or, years ago with the COVID-19 pandemic, constantly changing. And, you have to be willing to adapt as well. You can't just have that, one set mindset at all. So, being sustainable is, of course, all the basics, having a strategic plan and having your reserve fund. But I think those are pretty much the basics of it when it comes to actual living and working through sustainability. It's, about building long-term relationships with people that are utilizing your organization, with donors, with your staff as well. Ensuring that your organization is building the trust of everybody in the community, having full transparency. And of course, making sure that you don't ever forget what your mission is, and making sure everything you do day to day is absolutely aligning with your mission, no matter what the current state of affairs look like. When it comes to sustaining the way things are done, you have to ensure that what you're doing is relevant. So again, it goes back to pivoting and of course changing the way things are done. The way we do planned giving now isn't the way it was done 20 years ago. And in another 20 years, it's going to look completely different as well. I mean, the people who are giving now aren't the people who are going to be giving in 20 years. And the way that those people grew up and learned about charities and gave to charities is going to be completely different than what we're doing right now. So, ensuring that you're looking at all of that when you're thinking about sustainability. It's not just the day to day, it's, thinking long term and thinking to the future.
You are making me think of an article a board chair recently sent to me, one of my clients, and he sent it to me on LinkedIn. He was like, take a look at this. And it really was all about how giving trends have changed, how philanthropy has changed. And it really comes with our the varying generations, right? We have a lot of generations right now in this philanthropy cycle. And I define philanthropy as the way I define leaders. We're all leaders and we all have the ability to be a philanthropist, right? And so really looking at it of how donors are giving and the behavior of how they're giving. They're not waiting till the end of the year. They're not waiting to do one big lump sum, right? And it's like really with social media, there's a lot of allies and advocates out there that are pushing their personal social agenda and what they believe in. So I'm really curious, like how your leadership style has maybe changed, or how you define your leadership style, Heather, in light of everything you said, right? Like we're rethinking, we're adapting, we're looking at sustainability in different ways. So how does that impact your leadership style?
I think every day is different. I think it's constant that, every day I come to work and I'm like, this is what I'm focusing on today. This is my priority for today. And then at the end of the day, I go, I didn't even do that yet. And that's what I'm finding more and more as a leader. So in the official capacity as Director of Development and Communications with my organization, I've only started that role at the beginning of this year. So in this organization and with this staff, I'm new as a leader, but at the same time within my community and things like that, I've tried to take on a leadership role prior to having this official role. So I think, I'm very much a team. Like I don't try to look at myself as a leader or anything like that. I mean, any experience or expertise that I have is something that my team is going to benefit from. It's not something that I'm holding on to type thing. Being able to communicate really well is really key to me. So, ensuring that my team is included in conversations, ensuring that I'm getting their opinions on things, because we all have differing experiences. So we bring different things to the table. So trying to include that. And then, communicating why we go a certain way, why we do what we do, and why this is the decision we landed on. I think when somebody understands the why behind something, they're more likely to support it and they're more likely to feel appreciated for their input. I want my team to realize that they are respected, that I really appreciate everything they do, trying to, it's really quick to, read something, to proofread it and pick out the mistakes or edit it, but then actually taking the time to point out all the good things that were in it as well is something that I'm really mindful of. And I think that comes from the people that I've worked under, the leaders that I've had in the past have been really great with those things. And I think that's how I've become, like, gotten to where I am today in this role. So having, great leaders before me has really set the bar pretty high, which is great because I am the type of person who, when you reached out to me to do this podcast, I was like, that sounds absolutely terrifying. I'll do it. And that's really how I try to go about things is, I've been asked in my role before, is this something you've done before? Is this something you feel comfortable with? And I'm like, nope, but it's part of the role and it's how I'm going to grow and it's how I'm going to become better at what I do. And, there's never an end goal. It's always trying to improve. So when it comes to being a leader, I want that to be passed on to my team and I want them to feel that way as well.
Oh, that gives me chills. And I love that you embrace that. And for all of our listeners, that is exactly how this went down, right? LaShonda suggested Heather. Heather, I reached out to you and you're like, I've got to be honest, this terrifies me. I wrote back and was like, this is what you can expect. But you were all in. I mean, even with some, feelings of being uncomfortable, having this new territory, it speaks volumes to you as a leader. I also love that when you are editing something, you also brought the mindfulness into sharing what is the positive and the praise. And I'm sure maybe you yourself, Heather, but some of our listeners have that, red ink PTSD and we're trauma bonded in that way, right? Where it's like, oh my gosh, I remember getting, edits back from a teacher, edits back from a boss, where everything just looks like it's just, there's blood all over this paper because nothing I did was right. But to also focus on, well, what was done well and being mindful of that when it comes to showing up. I also love that you brought in, the value of having your staff and your team feel seen, feel heard, have that buy-in opportunity. Such critical moments, right? And so I'm really curious, is there a particular example where you can go back and think of like, how you have adapted your nonprofit or maybe your team, right, to these changing times, whether it's economic, social landscapes, or just, overall leadership changes, sustainability, mission changes, right? Like there's a lot of changes, especially if we go back to March of 2020. But what are some, or maybe one specific example that comes to mind?
I think actually right now I'm in an example because, like I said, I've only started this role at the beginning of this year. And at that same time, our staff in my office were just a development team of 4. We went down to 2. And so I pivoted into this role, and then we had 2 new team members come on. So one of them is completely new to this organization. One of them was previously involved as well. So that is a huge change that we've had to adapt to in our office, is having the new staff. But I actually, in some ways it might be seen as, a hindering, but I actually see it as such a great opportunity. And it made me so excited when I knew that we were going to be able to develop this team because, we got people with different experiences, different backgrounds, different ages as well. And so then, that comes with a lot of different opinions and different, ideas. And so I love that we can all, even, if I'm doing something in my office and I'm like, that's not quite right, I can just reach out to the team and say, like, what's your input on this? And they have great ideas. It's brilliant. And even just, updating documents that we would update each year. Like we review our case for support or, our sponsorship package for one of our events. And year to year, we're making the edits, we're making the updates, but actually rethinking the document. So now that we have new staff and new people in those roles, they're thinking about it in their past organization experiences and what they did there that might have worked or what didn't work. And then they're asking me, like, is this what's working for you? Maybe we should try it this way. Or, can we focus on this area instead? Maybe we need to revamp this. So I absolutely love that this is what's been happening, like this example. And I can't wait to see like how it continues to grow, how we continue to grow as a team even.
For me, hearing that as an outsider sounds super refreshing, right? It sounds like, look, we all have the ability to contribute. We all have the ability to bring in our best skill sets, our best examples, and together, right, we will elevate who we are and what we do as a new team, a new cohesive team. And I don't know about you, but like, gosh, I have been on teams, Heather, where that has not been the case. And that was not a refreshing, good, warm,
Yeah.
fuzzy feeling inside.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that a lot, in the last, 6 months or so, that people are saying that they don't feel like that as a team. They're not getting the direction they need from their leader. So it's really things that I try to be mindful of when I'm doing that, to make sure that, we talk to each other all day long. We're constantly yelling at the other one, I got a second, or pop in here. Typically my door is open. If not, everybody has access to my calendar. They can see where I am at all times. They can schedule something, or they can just pop in and say, do you have 5 minutes? I just want clarification on this. So being able to have the personalities and the ability to work with each other and rely on each other, regardless of what, your exact job description is and what falls underneath you, knowing that you can still lean on the other person who's sitting next to you for support and advice, is really key for me.
Yeah, I love that environment and that culture of inclusivity and in all ways, right? Ideation as well. What about when you think of operational efficiency, and you did share, right? Like you had a larger team, cut down to a smaller team, growing to a larger team again. How have you balanced the need for operational efficiency while also investing, right, in some of your staff's professional development? What does that look like for you, or has it looked like for you either here or, previously in other positions?
I mean, I think there's a big thing for prioritizing, right? Unfortunately, when the team did go down small, we had to prioritize different things and different aspects of our fundraising, and we just, looked at it as strategically as we could and decided how to move forward. And we went with that type thing. When it comes to, now having a full team again and looking at professional development, I'm a really big advocate for that. I mean, as I said, I'm always the type of person to say, that's not something I've done, or that sounds really hard, I'm going to do it anyways. And so I want my staff to have that option as well. So, they come to me because they see a professional development opportunity being offered, and, encourage it as well. If it's during work hours, absolutely. As long as you have the bandwidth to do that, I think it actually is going to help them grow. I don't see it as something that's, big on their plate type thing. I think it's just going to help them be more strategic in the way they go about their job. It's going to help them have smoother processes. I'm a really big, we're all here involved in the Association of Fundraising Professionals, so I really encourage that. There's a mentorship program in that. I've been involved as a mentor and a mentee, and I encourage everybody to participate in that. And, we always encourage professional development. I get, newsletters from different companies, and if I see something and I think, oh, I think that would work for this staff member, I'm forwarding along and suggesting that they register for it. I think it's definitely something that we continuously have to go on. Our biggest asset as an organization is our staff. And if we invest in them and they feel happy and appreciated, then they grow, and they grow with the organization.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I've been in so many different positions, I'm sure you have too, where the professional development budget was larger. Sometimes it was non-existent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do we feed, in particular, the business opportunity, the professional development opportunities to our staff and even to ourselves in those times when we do have limited resources? And I shout out to so many amazing places that do provide also for free, because I think that's in everyone's budget, right? Even on top of
Absolutely.
other conferences and attendance and things like that. So I appreciate that as well. What about sustainability? We've talked a lot about leadership, a lot about sustainability, but in particular for your organization, what does sustainability look like? How are you defining it, right? And also making these decisions with a focus on that sustainability in the future in mind.
I mean, I think that kind of keys back to what I was just talking about with staff being such a big asset. I mean, they are what contributes to the sustainability of this organization. If they have the opportunities to grow and, develop this career path here, then I think that's going to develop the sustainability of the organizations. As I said, when we went down to a smaller team, we had to prioritize what we were doing. So definitely things were missed, or things were, an event didn't happen or something along those lines. So obviously that's not the focus of our sustainability, being able to have that full team, and to have that team who's happy and feels like they're valued and know that they have room to grow, and not that I want you to do this job description and we don't go past that type thing, knowing that, the job description sometimes says other responsibilities or other tasks, and that those are not necessarily a negative thing. Those are tasks that we get to learn and that we get to grow and we get to develop, right? I want our staff to take pride in what they do. And I think that'll just develop the sustainability of the organization and our fundraising as we do that, as we're happy here and as we want to do more, as we want to ensure the success of this organization. I think that's really key for the sustainability.
It is so nice to hear like your commitment to your team, your commitment to the staff, because I sadly feel, Heather, many of our organizations and organizational leaders have sometimes taken that for granted, right? Well, it's like, well, of course they're here. They're here for a paycheck. But more often than not, they're here for more than a paycheck, right? They're here for the belief. They're here for that mission alignment. They're here for, being of service in so many ways. So for you to really hold that close and to value and almost like truly covet that is wonderful to hear. I'm sure that there are so many people that want to know more about you, Heather, more about your organization. So how can people learn more about you as well as your nonprofit? Where should we go to find out more information?
I mean, to connect with me or to look me up, on LinkedIn, just under my name, and from my organization, we have, you can look up RMHC Canada and then directly go to each house itself and go from there to learn more about our organization. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. And so for those of you that want to know more or, want to chat with Heather, please do take her up on that. Okay. One final takeaway. Is there a final takeaway, final sage advice, anything that you want to leave our listeners with today as we wrap up today's discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I mentioned it. It's really important to surround yourself with people who are going to build you up and, setting goals for yourself. So, for example, when somebody reaches out and asks you to do a podcast and you don't want to do it, do it. Do those things, set the goals and, actually make a clear plan to do those. So a couple of years ago, I set goals for myself and I wrote out exactly who I needed to talk to achieve these goals and what books I might need to read to achieve these goals or what courses I needed to do. And I followed through with them all. And so 3 years later, now I did one goal the first year, one goal the next year, and another goal the third year. Being able to set those goals for myself, I think, is what's contributed to the position that I'm now in and being able to, lead this team, hopefully, to a lot of successes in the future.
I love it. Well, Heather, thank you for being terrified and doing it anyway. I think that is just a key critical mission that, again, I think is just so inspiring and empowering. So thank you for saying yes. And I so appreciate this conversation and all the great work that you do in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad you asked.